And what I would tell you about being a listing agent as we start down this path for the next 3 weeks. We all know that being a listing agent is the ultimate leverage in this business. There is no stronger leverage point for a realtor than having a vibrant listing inventory. Now, I will also acknowledge the marketplace that we are in right now, where listings are hard to come by. And I get that. I totally understand the dynamic. It's a nationwide phenomenon. But there is no bigger leverage point in real estate than having listings, okay? And there is no pathway to having a fabulous realtor life that equals having listing inventory. So at 27 years old, I decided that if I was going to run my real estate business, and I had 12 months to figure this out, that I would play by my rules. And my rules were I didn't like working weekends. We had just had our first child. I didn't really like open houses a whole lot. And I didn't like the fact that back then, before cell phones, I didn't like the fact people called my house all the time. So at 27 years old, I set out and I had 3 rules for myself. Rule number 1 was no weekends. Number 2, no open houses. Rule number 3, nobody calls me at home ever again. I'm going to run a business. Everybody told me I couldn't do it. The seasoned veterans told me it wouldn't work. Seasoned veterans told me that you can't do that. The client expects it. And I said, well, this is pretty simple then. My wife was going to make me quit anyway. I'll just quit if I can't run this thing the way I want to. 12 months later, I looked up and I had learned a lot about this game that we call real estate sales. And I would tell you that if I did it, anyone can do it. I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. It's just that I made a decision that I wanted to run my career the way I wanted to, and that meant I had to learn certain things. So what I'm going to talk to you about over the next 3 weeks is a very tight listing presentation dialogue. I would tell you this, that when you get this dialogue down, it serves you also very well on the buyer side. And I just did a couple of presentations this week for other clients. We are in a very, in my opinion, in my 35 years of being in this industry, we are in the most stressful real estate market I've ever seen for everybody involved. I believe this thing is more stressful, quite honestly, than 2008 to 2011 was. And it's hitting everyone. It's whether you're the listing agent now, it's stressful because of multiple offers. Whether you're the buyer's agent, oh my gosh, it's really stressful because your buyers are missing out. The buyers are stressed, the sellers are stressed, everybody's stressed. And we have to go back to our basic ingrained skill sets and processes. I changed my life becoming a listing agent. I'm going to lay out for you over the next 3 weeks a listing process, okay? A listing presentation, if you will, a way of approaching this that I promise you resonates with clients, differentiates you in the marketplace, which is a really big deal. So having said that, it's a very long open, and I apologize for a long opening, but I'm very passionate about listing presentations. I have 2 things I love to talk about. With agents, it's always listing presentations, and with brokers, it's always recruiting presentations, how to scale companies and things like that. So, by the way, you guys are really lucky. Not that Rosie isn't a fantastic owner. You have no idea, I don't think, what this guy is, because he's amazing. And I talk about him all the time, all over the country, and he laughs at me for talking about him. But you're going to be bowled over, if you will, by what Carl and his team bring to the table. So kudos to everybody on the call. Okay, with all of that said,
thank you, Wayne.
You're welcome. You're welcome. The platitudes were flowing this morning. There we go. All right, let me go right back up here to the top really quick. Okay, so I call this the ultimate listing presentation. it's a presentation, but it also is laying out things that I believe sellers need to know and understand. And I believe it's our duty in the field to do this. By the way, just so you know how this works, you will get a recording of this today, and you will also get a PDF of all of these slides. Okay. So if you'll just watch with me, and then at the end, I'll open it up for questions. Don't worry about taking tons of notes, because the slides are very content rich, and you'll be getting copies of all of this. Okay. Also, by the way, session 2, you'll get copies of everything that I reference in session 2. And then in session 3, you'll get, so you're going to end up with all of the materials, all of the dialogue for this listing process. So why did I create this? That's a question that people always ask me a lot. And I believe this, but because of the internet, today's buyer is very well informed. And the reality is the seller isn't. While buyer information is totally obtained online now, really accurate seller information is still driven by the agent that I choose to sit down and talk to about this selling process. Many agents are unable to explain the forces driving today's market. I have another session called The Immutable Laws of Real Estate. I would challenge you to look at real estate sales as a game that has a set of rules. And then our job is to create strategies within those rules. If you're unable to explain to a seller what's about to happen to them and the strategies that you have, then it strictly becomes a money play. And if you don't have strategies over and above what I expected to see, then I will start hammering you on trying to get you to do it for less. Agent value is no longer information. When I got in the real estate business, and for the first probably 15 to 20 years, our value was we had the information. You couldn't get the information without it. You couldn't find out about properties. You couldn't. These things weren't online. Let's just sum it up with that. But today, our value, your value, is the interpretation of information that a seller probably already has, and especially interpretation of information that a buyer has. Individual agents no longer control the information, so we have to start controlling the physical inventory, and that's the listing side of the equation. Third parties, talk about them for a second. They're trying to get to the seller side of this equation, putting themselves between you and the consumer. They started out with the buyer side. That was the easiest place for them to attack, because historically, the agents that are very heavy on the buy side are less professional than the agents on the listing side. So it's an easy place for third parties to get the foothold. But the ultimate play is to try to get to the listing side of the equation, because again, everyone understands that listings are leveraged. So the basic premise that we're going to deal with today is that every listing on the market or coming on the market is in one of 3 positions. The first position would be that market value is here and the asking price is actually above market value. Historically, this is a huge piece of the marketplace. There's always a very large inventory of overpriced properties. The second position would be that market value and asking price are in harmony with each other. This is optimal, right? This is what we're going for. And then the third position would be, and this is the marketplace that we were in 2008 to 9, 10, is that market value was actually higher than where asking prices needed to be in order to get properties sold. Now, this starts to frame, actually when we get into session 2 on pricing, this starts to frame how we structure our pricing strategy, is by basically where the marketplace as a whole is. And I would tell you that right now, this red line represents where we are on the pricing strategies that we would use. And what I mean by that is, in a normal market, historical sales data is the driver of pricing. But in this market that we're in, historical sales data actually carries less weight than the active competition that's on the market. Okay, so we're somewhere between the top line there and the midpoint line right now. But I would say this to you. The basic question that you need to be able to answer today is, where is your current inventory? Now, if we were doing this live, my next question would be, raise your hand. I'm not going to ask you to raise today because we're on Zoom, but think about this. I would say raise your hand if you know that you have a listing that's overpriced. And I would tell you that if you know that today, if you know that based on the current market forces, that property is not going to sell, then you have a duty, I believe, to go back to that seller and have a conversation with them. Because I think it's unfair for sellers in any market to disrupt their lives, clean their house constantly, and do all the things that we ask them to do when we can forecast that they don't have a chance of selling their house unless they make some kind of an adjustment. So the question is always, where's your current inventory? And if you have some of those listings, I think the question we have to ask is why? And I would contend that it is just, the reason is that our listing presentation wasn't quite tight enough. And so I'm going to give you the dialogue today that I believe is the ultimate way to approach this. So I think there's some rules when we start talking about listing property. I think there's rules, again, look at this as a game. There's rules of every game. There's rules of baseball, basketball. I'm a golfer. There's rules of golf. There's rules of board games. Everything has rules, right? So I think there's some rules to listing property. And rule number one is it's not about you. It's all about the seller. Our whole conversation has to revolve around the sellers and what the seller is trying to accomplish. Rule number two is sellers don't mutate in the middle of a transaction. And in fact, I would say the same thing about buyers. It's a rule of buyers as well. People don't get demanding in the middle of a transaction. People don't wake up one day and they're like completely different for some reason. They were there. They were that way the day that you met them. And so what's important to us is that we're working with people that we want to work with. And the dialogue that I'm going to show you, the line of questioning that I'm going to show you today, will allow you to pull out early how people are going to react if the pressure gets turned up. Number three, sellers absolutely have selective hearing and selective memory. They do not remember everything we say in a presentation, and they do not hear everything that we say in a presentation. So there are certain salient things that you have to put in writing and follow up with them after the presentation. Rule number four, I believe it's a two-step process. Now, I know that there's probably a lot of people on here today that do a one-step listing process. What I mean by that is I call you, you come out, you've already run your CMA, and we sit down and you tell me what my house is worth and what the game plan is going to be. I am a two-step listing person. What I'm going to lay out for you is a two-step process. When I decided I was either going to get in or get out of this business, I changed my life literally calling expired listings. And I developed the dialogues and I still teach classes on it today. What I realized or what I learned was a two-step process in a competitive environment wins. Two-step process beats a one-step process. It's more caring, and it's a process that resonates with the seller more than the agent walking in, sitting down and saying, here's what your house is worth. I would challenge you to always move, as we move forward in this industry, to understand that every moment of every day you are competing. Even if it is someone you have sold houses to for years or sold houses for years, I would contend that you're still competing. You're competing with online valuation models. You're competing with a Zestimate. So just design your presentation, sharpen your skill sets up to be able to compete, even though you may not physically be competing against another human. You are competing every day. Everything that you say in a presentation is being filtered through information that you may or may not know that the seller has. And rule number five, Listing property is more competitive than it's ever been, and that is simply because we're always competing. Why do you want to be a listing agent? Well, just really quickly, it's leverage. I mean, it's bottom line is leverage. If I have a $200,000 house, I can make a lot more money theoretically than if I just have a buyer. And here's how it works. I won't spend a lot of time on this. A $200,000 house at 3%, if I'm a buyer's agent, I make $6,000 on the deal. And absent a massive past client program, it's kind of one and done. However, if I'm the listing agent, I can have a $200,000 sale as the listing agent. I can sell that property myself and be the selling agent, another $200,000 sale. I can take that seller out, and if they move laterally, on another $200,000 sale. And if I am able to garner the natural organic leverage point of having listings, I should be able to pick up a cross sale. Perhaps I pick up a buyer off of that property and go sell them something else. So all of a sudden, my $200,000 listing is turned into potentially $800,000 in sales, 24 grand. Now, that last piece of this puzzle in this overheated market that we are in, that organic leverage point of just having listings has gone away. And it's because these things are selling so quickly with multiple offers, we don't have the ability to do the leverage, right? We don't have the ability to perhaps to send out just listed and just sold postcards, or to hold the house open. I didn't even get to hold it open when I already had a contract on it. What I would tell you to do from a marketing perspective is, even if you have a listing that sells very, very quickly, and you've been doing, I just was talking to a client of mine in Indiana about this the other day, and he said a lot of my agents are not doing the things that they always did from a marketing perspective around their listings. And I said, well, it's costing them business. Even if you list a house and it sells day one, I would challenge you, if part of your process has been to send out just listed postcards, go ahead and send them. And then turn around immediately and send the just sold postcard. Because listings still are a huge leverage point, and we need to be leveraging them. And the truth is, if you want to be an outstanding listing agent, and we always, and Carl, I'm sure, will at some point teach you the class of a rolling 10, how to always have 10 listings. I believe that our life changes when we always carry at least 10 listings. Now, I'll acknowledge in this market, this is tough. Yeah. I'll also acknowledge that this market will shift. It always does. It always has. It always will. We are in a very cyclical market. Okay. It's going to change. So make sure that your skill set is up and ready to be able to capitalize on this thing when it moves. When you have 10 listings on a regular basis, you now have a forecastable business model that we can really do some really cool things with. In order to get there, you got to master a listing presentation. And it has to be different than what other people are saying. The most important thing you can do is to master a listing presentation, and that's simply because mastery gets us our time back. The better that we are, the less we have to work. I always talk to people about, I believe there's 3 kinds of time in life. I think that every moment of every day, we are operating in one of the 3 kinds of time. The first kind of time is playtime. And we all want to have high quality, high quantity playtime. We want to go do the things we want to go do, eat in the restaurants, take the trips, whatever, whenever we get over the pandemic. Then we have playtime, and then we have pay time. Now, what we want in pay time is high quality pay time, not quantity, high quality pay time. And the quality of our pay time is directly proportionate to the quality and quantity of our prep time. See, the prep time allows us to get really, really good so that we can master the key components of our business, so that we don't have to work as much, so we can go play more. So if the quest is for more money and less time, which I have realized over the years is kind of just the human condition, then mastery of a listing presentation in our arena is the key. And why is that? because in every area of life, mastery frees up your time. So let's talk unique selling propositions for just a minute. So price is only an issue in the absence of value. What we're seeing in the industry right now is all of the models that are being proposed are price driven. A lot of the brokerage models that are out there now are completely price driven. I'm seeing ads every morning on television for, I think it's called Perfect Agent, where these people go on these ads and say how much money they've saved, right? A lot of the online valuation models are all based on the fact that we're paying too much money to realtor. So the question that you have to always be able to answer is, what makes you better than other real estate agents? Now, we don't have time to go through the normal live class setting of this, where we would now pause and I'd have you write this down. The questions you always have to be thinking of is, what makes me better and why should somebody hire me? Let's say that I inherit a house in New Jersey and I'm going to interview you all. Why would I hire you? What do you bring to the table for me over and above what the other realtors that I might talk to bring to the table? And remember, if you don't know what those things are, the public won't know it either. Okay? You've got to be very specific on the reasons why I should hire you and avoid big words. So here's some samples of what could be unique selling propositions. The fact that you'll give me a cancellation guarantee up front. This is probably the mother of all value propositions for a listing agent. You can fire me anytime you want to. Interestingly, what I've discovered over the years is most realtors, if the seller said, you know what, I'm done, I don't want to do this anymore, most realtors will let people out of a listing agreement and go ahead and cancel. However, we're hesitant to get in front of it and make it part of the reason that you should hire me. So I think that's a huge value proposition. Direct line sign calls, the fact that, and this varies by state law, but the fact that if I call the number on the sign, I'm going to get you as the listing agent. There's a whole series of value propositions within that. The fact perhaps that you make circle prospecting calls around your listings. The fact that you give a 48-hour feedback guarantee to the seller. That you give them weekly phone updates and it's guaranteed. A bi-weekly market report. And I'm going to go through a lot of these value propositions in session 3, which is unique selling proposition. We'll show you how to present each of these things so that if you choose to grab a hold of a couple of these, if you're not already doing them, you'll have the dialogue that goes along with them. A reverse prospecting system. The fact that your Zillow Premier could perhaps be a huge value proposition. The fact that you're an individual agent is a huge value proposition. The fact that every time I call, I'm going to get you. Oh, by the way, the fact that you're a team is a huge value proposition. Your social media marketing, professional staging, photography, just listed postcards, past client sphere marketing, open house process, mailing to a move up neighborhood. Again, I'll explain most of these when we get into session 3. A top 100 marketing list. The explanation of the actual process that someone is about to go through, your market knowledge, and your listing conversation dialogue. Now, you're not going to have all of these value propositions, but we want to have a situation where when you're in a competitive environment, when you get done with your presentation, the seller sits back and says, is that how this works? And you can confidently say, yes, this is how the process works. And then to have the seller in their mind going, well, you know what? This makes perfect sense to me. And this is the person that I need to hire. Again, I am going to keep stressing this. You're competing every day in today's environment, even though you may not know the name of who you're competing against, because sometimes you're not competing against a human. So here's what we're going to talk about. Today's session. A lot of content. Again, you're going to get the slides. You're going to get the dialogue. We're going to have a pre-listing phone conversation. We're going to have a pre-listing appointment. You're going to do some homework and figure out the value of the property. You're going to confirm the appointment. Then we get into the serious dialogue when we're sitting with a seller. We're going to cover their past experiences in selling houses, tell them one of three things may happen, and uncover their important issues. We're going to ask them to hire us, perhaps reprioritize their important issues, cover win, lose, and mutual expectations. That's today. Then we talk about the price of the property. Then we talk about the marketing plan and we ask them to hire us. So this presentation is relational, then value, then marketing plan. And the idea behind this is if we can't check off relationally and we don't want to work together, right? Then it doesn't really matter what your house is worth because we're not going to have a match. But if we relationally see the world the same way and we're on the same page and we can get the value right, then we'll talk marketing, because no amount of marketing will fix a bad price. We know this. The game is we have to make sure that the seller understands the importance of proper pricing and positioning in a market, because a marketing plan will not ever overcome that, regardless of market. So step one is the pre-listing. Handling the initial conversation properly probably does more to set you apart from your competition than any other activity. The key to the conversation is a pre-listing questionnaire. I am a huge proponent of pre-listing questionnaires and buyer questionnaires. I would propose that you laminate a pre-listing questionnaire and a buyer questionnaire, and you have them with you at all times, so that whenever we get into any conversation with someone, we're ready to go. Now, what's written here is printed off on bright colored paper, okay? You can do that, that's fine, or you can just laminate them and carry them around with you. The questionnaire is nothing more than talking points. It allows you to be more confident when you're handling this initial call. Now, when I say call, this could be an initial incoming call. This could also be, if you're on the online world, this could be a Zillow lead that comes in and you uncover in the conversation that they have a property to sell. This could be someone coming into an open house that has a property that they also need to sell prior to being able to purchase perhaps the one that you're in. Just to be prepared to have the conversation. Here is the pre-listing questions, okay? So I want you to work on and practice working your way through this dialogue. You are going to get a copy of this, okay? You're going to get a copy of everything that I lay out that I think that you need for this process, okay? What I would contend that you do is you set 2 appointments if you're going to use the 2-step process, and you set them both at the same time. Now, the key questions on here are right here in the middle. Do you have a price in mind for your property? Agents are very hesitant to ask that early on. I've discovered over the years that it's a very safe thing to ask people. There's only 3 possible answers to this. Number 1 is I have no idea what my house is worth. Number 2 is I think it's worth X. And number 3 is, yeah, I got an idea what it's worth, but I don't want to tell you. Okay, that's fine. It's not a problem. I think it's a question that we need to ask. And if they know, I would like to know what it is. The other question, are you going to be interviewing other realtors? Now, I've had people say to me over the years, Wayne, why in the world would I introduce the fact that they should interview other realtors? Well, whether you introduce it or whether it's part of their process, if they're going to interview realtors, they're going to interview realtors. It's just better that you know that you're perhaps competing against someone that you've gone up against before. Because when you become a high volume listing agent, you start to discover that you compete against the same people all the time. And you start to learn parts of their presentation. So if someone's talking to someone, I want to know who they're talking to. And oh, by the way, how did you hear about me? Set 2 appointments. We want to try to get out to the first appointment as fast as we possibly can. That's the next question there. And then we want to build in 24 hours between the time that I come and look at your house and the time that we actually do the presentation. You want to deliver a pre-listing packet. Now, if you don't currently have a pre-listing packet, it is crucial that you get a pre-listing packet, okay? And I know Carl will I know Carl has these materials for you, so if you don't have them already. Hand deliver the pre-listing package to the house, because really it just separates you from everyone else. All right. So here's the exact dialogue as you're going out to the house. Okay. As we tour your home, you're going to take the packet with you and you're going to take your questionnaire with you. Why don't you pretend I'm a buyer and show me around your home, pointing out what you feel are the selling features? Or your opening dialogue is, thank you so much for letting me come out today. If you would, show me around your house and tell me what made you purchase this one over the other ones you consider. Sellers will almost always look at you and say, where do you want to start? And the answer is wherever you want to, because historically they'll take you to their favorite room first. Now here's the game. You need to have materials with you so that you can take tons of notes and try to not comment. The seller will hit you with all of what they believe are the selling features of their home. And if you do this, like a lot of people do it, they're like, oh, that's so wonderful. I love what you did here. I love what you did there. This is awesome. And while we're trying to build rapport, what the seller is thinking as we validate these moves that they've made in their house, they're thinking the price is just continuing to go up. So what we want to do is we want to take as many notes as we possibly can and make as few comments as we possibly can. As long as you're taking notes, you're fine. Okay? Taking notes is what allows you not to have to comment on everything. The purpose of this visit is for you to see the condition of the home. It's nothing more or nothing less than that. And this appointment should last no more than 15 to 20 minutes. Any longer than that becomes dangerous because the seller will start asking you questions. And you're really not prepared to answer them yet.
Oh, yes, I am.
So the purpose of this meeting, okay, is to get the condition of the house, for the smells of the house, whatever. All right. When you leave the house, give them the pre-listing packet and give a quick explanation. Here's a packet of information that tells you more about me and the way that I work. In the back of the questionnaire, please fill it out prior to our next meeting. It'll be the basis for our conversations. There's also a seller's disclosure statement in the back. If you would fill that out as well, that would be great. You give them the packet of information and you ask them to fill it out. Okay? The odds are pretty good. I'll just be upfront with you. The odds are pretty good they won't fill it out, but that's okay. Here's the questions that are in the back. We're going to go through these in detail here in just a second. Okay? There's 13 questions. They are the basis for the conversation. Call back and confirm the appointment. Again, now remember, on the initial call, I'm suggesting you set 2 appointments. One is immediate to come out and take a look at the house. The other one is perhaps 24 hours later. You want to call back and confirm just to make sure that the time they wrote down is the time that you wrote down. It's nothing more than that. And to make sure that everybody that needs to be there will be there. And ask them, have they had an opportunity to review the package? If yes, that's great. If no, it would be great if you could review it. But if you can't, I understand. I really appreciate your time, and I look forward to visiting with both of you tonight at whatever time. Step 2 is the actual listing presentation. Now, you've seen the house, right? You've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of the house. And the reason I tell you that I think you need to build 24 hours in here is so that you can develop the dialogue to handle the tough issues, right? Because these are issues that need to be discussed initially in the listing presentation, not later on after we get the feedback. Stephen Covey said, seek first to understand, then to be understood. And Thomas Jefferson said, nothing gives one man more control over the other than to remain cool and unruffled in all circumstances. You want these to be slow conversations when we're sitting down talking with a seller. Because here's one of the dynamics of our industry. Sellers start this process very emotionally, and they become pragmatic over time. But buyers start the process very pragmatically and then buy strictly from emotions. So we're dealing with an emotional tinderbox for the seller. So we want to make sure that we stay slow and calm in these conversations. The truth is, in every listing presentation, somebody's going to be very passionate about what this thing's worth. The problem is, most of the time, it's the seller, not the agent. Most agents just want another listing, especially in this market. The seller can be very passionate. Now, understand this. The seller doesn't have to be logical about what they're telling you, because it's all based on emotion. But you have to be incredibly logical and be able to cover your strategy on pricing and everything else that you do from every possible angle. No one wants to be told what to do. Everyone wants to have some input into the decisions that affect them. And for the longest time, top agents have come in and basically said, you know, sit down, shut up, and hang on. Here's how I do this. Here's what it's worth. I've got plenty of listings. I don't really need yours. And they basically run over people. Well, we want to create an environment that creates questioning both ways. We want to set that up with people. Always allow a seller to question you on any statement that you make. But more importantly, always question the seller on what they say. In other words, rather than you, and I hear this a lot in recordings of people's listings presentations, rather than you defending your position, have the seller defend their position to you. If you're doing these in the office, which I would recommend, I always had people come into the office rather than me going to their kitchen table for the presentation, mainly because it differentiated me. Now, in a COVID world, we would say, if you're doing this over Zoom, okay, that's fine. The same rules always apply. I don't know how many of you are doing your listing presentations over Zoom now, or if you're still going to the house. It doesn't matter to me, honestly, where you go, okay? But if you choose to start doing them in the office, it does differentiate you at some level. I always did them in the office because I had a tendency to run late. And I don't know if you're afflicted with that disease or not, but I was always running a little bit late to these appointments, and I realized it was a little bit rude of me to be late. And so I decided if I had people come to the office, I wouldn't be as late. I thought, well, I'll just try it and see if I can get them to come in the office. And I really had no problem, again, not a pandemic world, getting people to come into the office. So starting the conversation, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. You guys have a great house. Before we get started, I'd like to ask you a question. Now, here's where we really are getting going with this. Have you ever been through the process of selling a home before? Tell me about it. Tell me about what you've gone through in previous sales experiences, good experiences or bad. Now, if it's a first-time home seller, they may say, well, I've never done this before. Well, do you have any friends that have? Do you have any family members that have? Do you have any preconceived ideas about this process at all? The big three questions are this. Well, in that vein, and so what I want you to have people do is if they say, yeah, we've sold 15 houses, tell me about each one. Tell me what you enjoyed. Tell me what your struggles were. What they will do for you, if you'll go down this line of questioning with people, is they will build your presentation for you. And what they will also unwittingly do is they will all of their good experiences are always when the house sold very, very quickly and they got very, very close to asking price. And all of their bad experiences were long market times and price reductions and lack of communication from their listing agent. I learned this in calling expires, that the biggest complaint people had about listing agents was we put a sign in your yard and you never heard from us again. So ultimately, the biggest value propositions that we can bring to the table for sellers is communication and strategy. And communication actually more so than strategy. The big three questions. Do you think selling a home is easy or hard? Do you think it takes a long time or shouldn't take very long to sell your house? And do you think there's a lot or a little negotiation that goes on? And at this level, all we're trying to figure out is what's that filter that they're going to run this process through. For all of us in life, as we go through different phases of our life, we have filters in our brains. And it's framed, going into an experience that I've had before is framed by my experiences when I've done this before, be they good or be they bad. It's very important to me that we know this. And I say on here, go 3 deep with all questions. What that simply means is when I ask you the question of, do you think selling a home will be easy or hard? Well, Wayne, I think it'll be hard. Okay, what do you think will be hard about it? When you say hard, what do you mean? Right? This is the point throughout this that we got to be very, very leery of, for lack of a better word, leading the witness if we were in court, right? I hear people sometimes, do you think it'll take a long time or not very long? Well, no, I don't think it should take very long. And a lot of agents will go, okay, so you know what, you're right. In this market right now, we're seeing average market times be like 15 days. And that may or may not have been what the seller meant by that. So in the very beginning, as per Stephen Covey, seek first to understand, then to be understood. Huge point alert, write down all the answers exactly as they state them. Keep asking questions until you're crystal clear on what they said is what you heard and have written down. Starting the conversation. Well, at the end of tonight, one of 3 things will happen. Number 1, you'll choose me to list your home, and that would be fabulous. Number 2, you'll choose someone else. That wouldn't be so great for me. And thirdly, I may not be able to do this. Now, that may sound strange, so let me explain. We may come across some need or expectation you have that I can't satisfy or exceed. And if we reach that point, I'll be unable to take the listing. Does that make sense? And the seller will say, well, yeah, that makes sense. Because in every setting, it's only 3 things that can happen when you're talking to someone. You make the decision to work with me, you decide you don't like me as well as someone else and you choose them, or I may decide that for whatever reason gets uncovered in this, that I can't do this. I can't satisfy, I can't exceed what you want to see happen. It allows you to politely tell the seller that you're willing to walk out. I think every day when we wake up as realtors, we need to have this mentality with everyone that we're talking to. And that mentality in our minds is, there was life before I had this conversation with you today. Would you like some help? And oh, by the way, if you would like some help, here's the process that I would use to help you accomplish what you're trying to do. But oh, by the way, there will be life after you. Uncovering their important issues. Stay totally neutral. This is not the time to address the issues. It's just to find out where their heads are. What's the most important issue this time in the sale of your home? In other words, what has to happen? What's the one thing that we have to nail so you can say, wow, this was a fabulous experience? And it will be framed, I promise you, by their past experiences. What's important to you about that? I will tell you, most people, most sellers will lead with money. I have to get my price. I have to get X amount of dollars for my house. Ask the question, why that amount of money? What else is important to you about that amount of money? If that's where they go with the first level, I will tell you, most sellers will lead with money. What else we have to add? What's the next most important thing? Most sellers will say timing. Most sellers will lead with money, follow up with timing. Again, question them about what's important about that specific timing. And then one more time at the third level, going 3 deep, what else is important to you? Now, I don't know how long y'all have been doing this. I'm 35 years in this business. And when I got into it, I was taught and trained that I already knew what every seller wanted. They wanted the most money in the least amount of time or shortest amount of time with the least amount of hassle. I asked 3 questions, but I already knew the answers. I already know what you want. In fact, let me just tell you what you want as a seller. You want the most money in the shortest amount of time with the least amount of hassle. Let me show you my game plan to get you the most money with the shortest amount of time with the least amount of hassle. Blah, 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 let's list. And that would work to a certain degree. And then I discovered this dialogue from a book called Top Grading by a gentleman by the name of Bradford Smart. And what I discovered was this third question's total wild card. And then I discovered even more things as I started going down this road. Most people will lead with money. Most people will follow up with timing. But the third level, it's a wild card. And I'll tell you my classic story that actually happened. It was a past client of mine. I had sold them their house. They came into the office. I just started doing presentations in the office. I got down the first question that we'd like to really get our money back. We'd like to have it sell for X amount of dollars. Okay. Second question, we'd like to be in Kansas City, which is, I'm in Missouri, so Kansas City's close. We'd like to be in Kansas City by this date. And then I said, okay, well, what else is important to you? And the wife, who had really not said a whole lot so far, said, I would like a really nice family to buy our house. And the husband said, well, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard anybody say. What do we care who buys this house? And then the wife went off and said, I'm sure you feel that way. You get up every day, you go to work, you do this, you do that. I want a really nice family to buy my house. And I understood what she was saying. He didn't. He said, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard anybody say. And they started a fight over this last issue. And I walked out of the room. I said, y'all need to talk. And I waited for the conversation to die down. And I walked back in. I go, okay, I don't mean to, kind of dig in, but what is that third most important thing? And the husband looked at me and smiled, and he said, we want a really nice family to buy our house. That's going to be this third thing. And the reason I bring that up is this. In most listing presentations, there's 3 people in a room. Okay? 3 is a really bad number. There's a song that said 1 was the loneliest number. No, 3 can be the loneliest number because somebody is the odd person out. If you have children, you know what I'm talking about. We had a rule with our kids. You can have 1 kid spend the night, or you can have 3 kids spend the night. You can't have 2 kids spend the night because by the end of the night, somebody's crying because they get triangulated. There's a concept of triangulation. We have to make sure when there's 3 people in the room, if you take a side of one party over the other, you're going to get triangulated. So this was the manifestation of this was with an agent that worked for me for years. And he was a huge producer, but all of a sudden he started missing out on listing presentations. And he said, I want to change up my listing dialogue. And I said, okay. And I said, why don't you just try a couple of these questions that I've been training people on? And he said, okay. And so he went out and he asked the question, what's the most important thing? And the gentleman had been transferred with Kraft Foods. We have a big Kraft plant where I live. He'd been transferred with Kraft Foods, and they got done. Don got done with the presentation, and the seller said, well, let us think about it. Don said, okay. So he went out to his car. They called him while he was still in the driveway and said, come back in and list our house. And he went back in and he asked them, he said, why did you choose me? Because he'd been getting beaten all of a sudden by everybody he was always competing against. And the husband looked at Don and he said, Don, he said, I've been transferred 15 times with Kraft. You're the first realtor that's ever asked us what was important to us about the sale of our house. And the wife looked at Don and she said, but that's not why you're back. She goes, you are actually the first realtor that's ever talked to me. Everybody talks to him because he's the transferee. I'm the one that has to sit here and deal with this. Now, Don had originally said, I don't know that I need these questions. I'm doing a lot of business. After this one question, he came back to me and he goes, where's the rest of these questions? You're obviously onto something here. All right. I promise you, if you get this dialogue down or start working this into what you're already doing, it no longer, we've always heard in this industry, oh, you always want to be the last agent in. If you have this dialogue, it doesn't matter which agent you are, first, middle, last, it will frame how they look at every other conversation they have with agents. Always write down the answers and read them back to the sellers exactly as they've said them. Your goal is to get them focused and find their most valued criteria. Then we're going to check for commitment. Well, if I could show you a way to get you these 3 things, is there any reason you wouldn't hire me? And the only reason for that question is you're looking for, well, really, we're going to try selling it ourselves first, or we've talked to, Joe Flabeats, the discounter, and he's really cheap. Just so that you know going in before you go to the next level where their heads are. Never push. It's to allow the seller to self-discover what a relationship with you would be like. And you can always refer back through the rest of the presentation to these 3 core things that they said were important to them. Then we want to change gears. We want to continue to cover the expectations of the relationship. What do you expect out of the agent that you hire? I mean, if you hire me, what do you expect from me? What you'll hear a lot about is communication. You'll hear people talk about marketing. Sometimes people say, I expect to hear from you a lot. Oh yes, I remember earlier in your past experiences that you didn't like, one of your complaints was that you didn't hear from the agent. Well, what could I expect from you as a seller? The number one answer is we'll keep our house clean and do whatever you tell us to do over and above that. How does somebody win with you? If you hire me, what must I always do when dealing with you? How does somebody lose with you? What must I make sure I never do in all of our dealing? What's your preferred communication style? Okay, guys, look, I will tell you that in today's world, there is no doubt with DocuSign, Dotloop, whatever, with texting, with emails, it is much easier to communicate now. However, it is much harder to be someone's trusted advisor on a really big investment in their life if all we're doing is sending them text messages and emails. So ask them, how do you prefer to communicate? And really what we're looking for is on the big issues, right? And lastly, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being dishonest and 10 being totally honest with you, how honest do you want me to be with you? And they don't all say 10. People will say somewhere between 8 and 10 normally. And when someone says an 8, you have to say, well, okay, wait a minute, what's an 8? And what they'll say is, I want you to be honest. I want to make sure that you're always nice to me. In other words, don't beat me up with information. That now sets the ground rules for how we will not only communicate, but now I know what you expect. I know what you can expect, right? The truth is, every relationship in life breaks down over a lack of having this conversation. Expectation dialogue doesn't just happen. It doesn't work its way into conversations. You have to be willing to take the conversation there. But when you do, everything changes. And I would say, well, I asked you what you expected of me and what I could expect of you, and I actually have my own list. Here's what I expect of sellers and what I think sellers have the right to expect from me. And I would contend that in your mind, you do have this list. You have a list in your head of everything that a seller or a buyer can expect from you, and you have in your mind things that they can't expect from you, but they're probably not in writing, and they need to be. So here's a sample list. You can expect me to be very honest with you about the sale of your home. In fact, you said you wanted me to be a 10 or a 9 or whatever that number was. You can expect me to always look out for your best interests. If you hire me, I will truly represent you. You can expect me to constantly and continually market your property, and I'll go down that strategy here in a bit. You can expect me to call you within 48 or 72 or 96 or 24, whatever hours you know you can consistently do. You can expect me to return all of your phone calls, to talk to you at least once a week, handle all the details, handle it professionally, give you honest feedback from every showing, and advise you on changes you could make on the property to increase its marketability. Here's what I would ask from you. And then there's the list. Keep it ready to show, lockbox, those various things. The next dialogue is simply this. I don't know about you, but I think our list matches up. It always will if you follow this process. I would love the opportunity to represent you in the sale of your home. What do you think? Once you've agreed, it's time for the next step. And if you follow this line of questioning, they will agree, yeah, this is completely different than any conversation I've ever had with a real estate agent. I would hire you. This is awesome. If you can get me the amount of money, didn't tell you I could, didn't tell you I couldn't. If you can get me the amount of money and we can do it in a timely manner, and you're going to communicate with me the way I want to, and you're going to do all these things, why would I not hire you? I think this sounds awesome. Time for the next step. which is pricing, which is next week. So we're going to get into the pricing strategy next week. This first conversation is what sets the tone for the entire relationship moving forward. All right, I'm going to stop sharing and open up the floor for any questions that you all may have. Okay. Questions? No questions. Okay, then I have a question for you. For those people that have your cameras on, hold up either one or two fingers. Currently, you are a one-step listing person or a two-step listing person. 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, 1. And then somebody going like this. Don't have any fingers up, right? Okay. This is a two-step presentation, all right? When we get into pricing next week, I think you'll see why. Okay, but if you're a one-step person, you can still use this same dialogue in the first step. Any questions, comments?
I do have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you feel that the two-step, I used to do two-step years ago and I don't, but in this market, do you still think that's feasible?
I do, as long as you set both appointments on the initial phone call, yes.
Okay.
If you don't set up both phone calls, you run the risk. Okay. Human behavior tells us that once someone sets up an appointment, they won't break it. Okay. But if you don't set them both up in the beginning, somebody can slide in between. Now, is there a chance someone will still slide in and list the house? Sure, there is. But if your materials are really great, right? And if you're doing things differently, sometimes on that initial phone call, people say, well, all the other agents, they don't, what's this two-step thing? Why do you need to come out and see my house? Everybody else is just going to come out once. My dialogue for that, literally on the first call, was, you know what, they must be smarter than me. I don't know how in the world I could figure out what your house is worth, nor what the specific marketing strategy would have to be for your house if I haven't been in there. That's why I do this. This is a big deal. I'm not just going to run in there. So have to play that out yourself.
And one of the reasons we bring Wayne in to do this presentation is because it's different than most of the other listing presentations that you might see. So it's all about kind of making it work for you. And we've had a lot of agents take some of those dialogue questions and just put them into their one-step process. And they've noticed that their conversion rate on listing appointments went up tremendously.
Yeah, a big part of this, guys, is this is a very emotional deal for sellers. This is their home, and we need to. Sometimes we lose sight of that. I mean, not intentionally, but sometimes we lose sight of that. This is their home. It's emotional, and this dialogue really helps to pull out those issues. It really does build your presentation for you. Yeah, if you get into asking the question. Anything else? Okay. Carl, I will send you for you to forward on to everybody. At some point, it'll actually probably be this weekend. So you guys will have this maybe by Monday. Okay. A recording, the pre-listing questionnaire that I referenced today. I'll also go ahead and give you the buyer questionnaire from when you get buyer leads. Okay. And then next week we'll talk about pricing, and I'll show you at least my pricing strategy. And see if it's something that you want to layer into what you're doing. Okay.
All right. Thanks, Wayne. We'll see you next week.
You bet, buddy. Thank you all. Have a great weekend.
You too. Bye-bye.